everyone, this is Abir and I have with me today my colleague from Digital of Things, Yunette. Yunette is a senior researcher and a UX designer. She has more than 7 years of experience, and we will be discussing today the topic of accessibility, and specifically in a design and a user experience design perspective. Can you take us through that, Yunette?
Okay, so when it actually comes to accessibility in that sense, I think us as UXers, we always tend to think of, when we do our work and think of users, we think of everyone. All right, so, but accessibility is more just, and inclusivity is more just split out for businesses, just to tell them that we are actually thinking of all users when we do our job. And when we map out designs and processes, we try to tend to think of all scenarios and want to include everything. And you know, like with these accessibility aspects, it is a little bit more unique scenarios than the norm. And you know, when it comes to user experience, you need to think of all kind of scenarios and aspects. And so as an example that we can do is a simple scenario. Let's say, for example, you have someone who is hard of hearing, and then another person who's got an ear infection.
Right.
And then lastly, a person who is on the subway and wants to listen to something, but he's got his earphones. Okay. What do these kind of guys have in common?
They've got a problem with hearing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we design something, let's say for example, all of these people do want to watch some kind of video content, and we didn't cater for these types of scenarios, we would in a sense ruin their experience, you know. And that's kind of what accessibility and inclusivity in a user experience aspect is. This was just one example, but there's multiple that we can use to think, oh, okay, so if we have video content that is part of our journey, how can I make it accessible and inclusive for all of these types of users and scenarios? So by just simply adding some subtitle text within the video, so even the guy who forgot his headphones, it's not going to be the same experience that he's used to, but he can still continue with his journey by looking at this video and understanding what's going on in it. Yeah. And the other part of that is, you know, like, why should we actually think about all of these scenarios? Why think about accessibility and inclusivity? So as it stands, you know, the world population with some form of limitation is 15%.
And that's quite a high percentage.
Exactly,
yeah,
of the global population. And this excludes any of those temporary scenarios, such as the guy with the ear infection, or even these unique scenarios, such as the guy with these headphones. So, you know, like just in thinking of this 15% plus these other, on top of those kind of scenarios, it actually becomes way more than just designing for the norm. And if we exclude these kinds of scenarios, we, in a sense, fail at giving the best possible experience
for all users. And
for all users. And as a UX designer, like, our key goal is to serve users and give them the best possible experience.
True.
Yeah. So when it comes to accessibility, like I said, I just talked about an auditory kind of example, but there's many more when it comes to vision and mobility, neurological, cognitive, medical even, and psychological. I mean, it can go on and on and on, and it can be a little bit complex, but I think you just need to really look at your demographics, your environment where your product is being done, and yeah, ultimately their scenarios and what the journey is for them towards that, and then you can really cater for these kinds of scenarios.
True. If we were to take like more of a real life examples, if we want to take color blindness, how would you give us a real life example of what are the things that right now we can fix or do, or in order to take that into consideration? How would we incorporate that into our design?
That's actually a really good question. So, and I like that you brought up colorblindness, because you know, us as UI designers or UX designers, we tend to just take the brand guidelines given by the company and we just use that and go forward. But when we actually test with users, and it's important because when we look at the global population again, We can say about 4.5% of these people are colorblind, and most of them, 1 in 12 men are actually colorblind. So if there's a room with 12 men, one of these tend to be colorblind, and that hinders the experience as well, because if we just use brand guidelines and sometimes two colors are very close to one another, or they can't differentiate between a primary and secondary button. Sometimes it's like to continue or to cancel, or it's a disabled button, they can't see the difference. So we tend to use tools such as stock. There is a lot of colorblind plugins that you can use on Chrome, just to see how you can view all of these 9 different kind of colorblindness and how they actually see the platform.
That's
and it's not as beautiful and colorful as like we think, but the key goal is just to make something accessible and usable for all. And yeah, so and then we sometimes even can go back to companies and be like, oh, can we actually change the contrasting, because this brand color isn't always digital friendly, and with color blindness it's also not adapting to what they can see or view.
To all users, true. That's really insightful. I think there are very small steps and small things that could be done, but they can go a very long way. Do you have any input? I know we're running out of time, but do you have any input about the motor? What can we do from a design perspective for motor disabilities or any problems in that sense?
Yeah, so there's motor and there's, again, like touch, those kinds of things. So just think about a different experience that someone would have who only has one arm, or it might be a mom with a baby in her hands, and even someone who temporarily broke their arm. Like, just try and see, if you design this process, how can you actually design that where you just have one arm to do everything. Sometimes some buttons sit at the top and then you need another hand to hold the phone to click the other button. How do you actually, these are all things that's going to have an experience on how they interact and how quickly they can get from A to B. When it comes to motor aspects as well, sometimes you get some people who let's say they're a little bit stressed, they might be a little bit shaky. Other people have kind of some medical implications that can also hinder them to use the mouse on the computer. And then we also designed that, you know, like some people actually have these hypotheses that people don't use keyboards, but they do. So just to also see that, how do you navigate on desktop view, which is using a keyboard? Can I actually navigate through my whole site? Can I click on things? Is it usable for that kind of scenarios? Yeah.
That's really useful and insightful. I'm sure that we're going to receive a lot of questions and comments regarding this topic. So feel free to write to us, and we'll try as much as we can to incorporate those topics and have maybe a separate session later on. Thank you.